I want you guys to think about a moment in your life where you were just super excited about something, but you just had to wait a little bit longer and the anticipation was just building. Maybe it's like a new movie that's coming out and you were just like waiting and you're like getting jacked up. Maybe a new game console. Maybe your family's been talking about like getting a puppy or something and you're just waiting in anticipation and you're getting like all pumped. Maybe for you, maybe you've had like a year or so and you've been practicing driving like week after week after week, and now finally that moment's come, you've booked your test and you are wanting to go and get your license and you are just excited and the anticipation for this moment is building. For me, when I was in middle school, I had braces and I was like this like weird looking ginger kid with a brace face, and is like, keep that in your own imaginations. But I had braces for like 2 years and I hated it. Like I hated having food stuck in my teeth. I hated like my mouth was always sore. I just did not like it. My brackets are always popping off and stuff like that. I did not like my braces. So for those 2 years, I just could not wait until the day where my braces were going to come off. And that day was supposed to be in March, 2 years later. So I'm there in the dentist chair, it's March, they're about to take my braces off. Then they realized that they'd made a mistake, and I had a big overbite before I had braces, so I had like buck teeth a little bit. And they put all those elastics in my mouth to pull my overbite back, but they'd done it kind of too much. They'd kind of overcorrected. Now I had an underbite, my mouth was all messed up, so I'd have braces for an extra 2 months. And now like, oh man, the anticipation was even getting more and more. Like I had to wait even longer, like the excitement is building, and I just could not wait for them to get off. And that is kind of where we find ourselves in this story. Like I felt like I had to wait forever to get my braces off. And Joshua and the Israelites, the people we've been talking about for these past 2 weeks, anticipation has been building for them. They have this promise of this land that they got from God generations and generations ago, and it honestly feels like they've been waiting forever. For many of them, they've been waiting their entire lifetime for this moment. And this is where we pick up the story. Joshua and the Israelites, they're just a few kilometers away from this river. And on the other side of this river is the promised land. So they are right there. Anticipation is building. We are about to reach the climax of this entire story. So let's jump in. Joshua chapter 3. We're going to start at verse 2. It says this: At the end of the 3 days, the officers went through camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. What we see here is that they are told to follow the Ark of the Covenant. And if you're anything like me, the first thing that came to your mind is like, is this like a new Indiana Jones like thing going on, the Ark of the Covenant? Like, let's go, this is like crazy. No, that's not really what's happening. But the Ark of the Covenant was like this, it was like this wooden box with like gold around it and like all these cool designs. And there was a lot of special things inside of it. But essentially this box, the Ark of the Covenant, was meant to be a sign or a symbol of the presence of God with the Israelites. All right? It is a symbol of the presence of God. And they are told to wait and to follow the ark. Where the ark goes, they are supposed to go. They are told to follow the ark. And why? Well, if you think about it, if what God says about himself is true, if God is all loving, all good, all powerful, all knowing, if he is the creator, then would you not want him to lead your life rather than leading your own life? Wouldn't he know better? So they follow the ark, they follow God's lead. And what we see here is that God desires to lead his people with his presence. Okay, that's important. He doesn't want to just lead his people with a map or a book of instructions or a text message. He wants to lead us with his actual presence. And presence is crucial. For me, I haven't lived with my family. I haven't even lived in the same province as my family for almost 6 years now. And I'm so thankful for technology. I can text them, I can call them, I can, like FaceTime or like play those little iPhone games or like whatever with my family, and that's great. But nothing beats going home for Christmas, going home for summer vacation, and actually sitting around a table with my brothers and my parents and hanging out with them and playing board games, because there's something so crucial about presence. Presence changes everything. So if you are someone that's watching this right now and you think that God has just left us this book and now he is far off and distant and removed from the world and just kind of letting us figure it all out, then you need to hear this. Here is your reminder in this story that God wants to lead you with his actual presence. He wants to go with you. He wants to go before you. He wants to do life with you. He wants to know what's going on, and he wants you to follow him. You see, not only does God want to lead you, he wants you to follow him. Because let's face it, there are a lot of people, maybe in your life, maybe you, or maybe you know someone who say that they are a Christian, who say they believe in God, but when it comes down to it, they aren't actually following him. Maybe that's you. When I was a little kid, I was obsessed with the WWE, like World Wrestling Entertainment. Like John Cena was like my hero when I was a little kid. I had a poster of him in my room. Don't tell anyone. Maybe he's still my hero. I don't know. Like, if he was here, I would want to go see him. That'd be awesome. But anyway, I love WWE, but most of my friends didn't really watch WWE as much as I did. So I kind of just watched it with my brothers. But there was this one kid at school. We'll call him Bobby. Now, Bobby was a bit of a gong show, right? Bobby's always getting kicked out of class. He's talking back to teachers. He's like swearing in school, and he's getting sent to the principal's office all the time. He's like stealing stuff from other kids. He's kind of a gong show. We didn't really hang out or anything, but one day Bobby invited me over to his house. And normally I would not go to Bobby's house, but he told me, hey, you should come over to my house because I got the WWE pay-per-view. So like this big event that was happening, and I never got to watch pay-per-view. So I'm all jacked up. I'm excited. I'm like, hey, Bobby, we're best friends. Let's go. So I go over to his house, and we're sitting on the couch. We have our popcorn. We're watching this WWE pay-per-view. It's like the best thing ever. Now out of the corner of my eye, I see a Bible sitting over on this table beside Bobby. And then I look up, and there's this picture on the wall of like Jesus, like, you know, like white hippie, like Swedish man Jesus, like on the wall. I'm like, Bobby, there's a Bible in here. He's like, oh yeah, man, I go to church. I'm a Christian. I'm like, what? No, you're not. Like, I've seen you at school. Like, you were, like, what? The things that he was doing and the thing that he's now saying, the two things did not match. But I have to admit, like, the more that I reflect on my life as a high schooler as well, like, man, there were times when my life looked no different than the non-Christian friends that I had at school. And that might be true for some of you today. Maybe you're watching this and you're not a Christian, and you look out at Christians and you think we're hypocrites because we look nothing like Jesus. We look the same as everyone else. Or maybe you're sitting there watching and that is you. That's your experience. You believe in God, you go to church on Sunday, you go to youth on Tuesday, but when it comes down to it at school or at sports or when you're hanging out with your friends, you look no different. You say there's a God, you say you believe in him, but at the same time, he isn't really involved in your life. And if you're being honest, you don't really want him to be involved in your life. You prayed a prayer and you're glad to go to heaven one day, but you don't really want him interfering with the things that are going on. You don't want him involved in your life at all. You're a big fan of God because he saved you, but you're not really following him. And I hate to break it to you guys, but God's not really interested in having a bunch of fans. He wants followers. He wants followers. Then we jump into verse 5. Joshua says this. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourself, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Now that word consecrate is actually very important. It can also be translated as sanctify, and essentially what it means is to be set apart. Joshua's telling the people to set themselves apart for a special purpose. And why? Well, essentially it's because God is holy, and God wants us to be holy too. God is different. He is removed from the world. He's removed from sin. And he wants the people that are following him to also do that with themselves, to remove themselves from the way of the world and to follow after God, to be different, to be unique, to be uncommon. And this idea of being set apart or being holy it's kind of hard to wrap our minds around, but maybe think about it this way. Do you know anybody that has like really fancy dishware? Like maybe fancy plates or fancy bowls or fancy glasses. And when you go over to that person's house, or maybe it's your own house, you don't typically like serve pizza or like hot dogs or like mac and cheese on all these fancy dishware, right? You don't get a fancy plate with like a slice of pepperoni pizza on it. That's just not really how it works, because people that have these fancy plates usually have them for a specific reason. This fancy dishware is set apart for a purpose, for a fancy meal, for special guests, for something that's uncommon. It's set apart for a special purpose. And if you call yourself a Christian, you are set apart, and you need to kind of see yourself in the same way. If you follow Jesus, you're not supposed to be common anymore. God is with you, and he wants to be working through you, and you are called to live a radically different life from those around you. A radically different life than those around you. You're called to be set apart. And when you set yourself apart in this way, God will do wonders among you. Does God do wonders among you? I wonder if maybe the reason we aren't seeing God do wonders in our lives is because we are so busy trying to fit in with all those people around us when we're supposed to be setting ourselves apart for God. We're so busy trying to fit in with everyone around us and to look normal and to be cool, when God's calling us to be set apart and to be different. Guys, this is a huge command in the Bible. God says to be holy because he is holy. And this is Jesus, man. Like, Jesus is holy. And I think sometimes we forget this part of Jesus. Like, we think of Jesus as our friend. And that's awesome because Jesus is our friend, and don't forget that. But he's so much more than that. Like we think of Jesus as just being our homeboy, like this dude we get to hang out with. He's so nice and loving, but he's so much more than that. Jesus is holy. He's pure. He's perfect. He's the King of Kings. He's the creator of the world. He rules and reigns over everything. He is your friend, but he is so much more than that. He's the King of Kings. He's holy. He's set apart. And that's what makes Jesus so amazing, because somehow this holy, perfect, pure God who cannot be anywhere near our sin and our brokenness, somehow in the person of Jesus, God made a way to enter into our story, to bridge that gap and to bring about relationship with him once again. Jesus makes a way for us to come back into relationship with God, and that is crazy. So he asks us to be holy too. So if you're someone that's sitting there and you were wondering, I used to wonder this all the time, if you were wondering what the will of God is for your life, I can sum it up in one word: holiness. Your consecration, your sanctification, your transformation. God wants you to become more and more like him, because guys, the goal for you is to get more of Jesus and to become more like Jesus in that process. That's the point. Then we jump ahead to the end of the story. Joshua, he's leading this group of people, the Israelites. The ark is going up before them to this river. They need to get across. It's flooding. They need to get across to the other side. That is the promised land. That's what they've been waiting for. That's the anticipation building up, and they're excited and it's crazy. Verse 14. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout this time of harvest. So this river is flooding. So it's not like a normal little stream. It's flooding. It's kind of getting crazy. The waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan. And those flowing down toward the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off. And the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all of Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. They walked across on dry ground. And if you guys are familiar with the Bible at all, or maybe even not, that maybe this starts to ring some bells, because we have seen something just like this before. This is an echo of the Exodus story. When Israel was rescued out of Egypt and they crossed the sea, God split it and they walked across on dry ground. Here too, God stops this flooding river and they get to walk across on dry ground. It's crazy. It's another miracle, and I feel like it's kind of overlooked in the Bible. Like, we don't hear about this crossing of the Jordan very often, but it's the same thing. The waters stop and they cross over on dry ground. So the story of the Red Sea was a story of rescue and salvation, right? Israel was trapped in bondage and slavery in Egypt, and God shows up. He rescues them. He redeems them. He saves them. He brings them salvation, and he gets them away from their slavery. It's a rescue story, and they've been set free. But here we find Israel, and they have not yet arrived at their destination, the place that God has rescued them for. And here, in this story, they have to trust and follow the lead of God's presence in order to finally reach that destination. So in this story, I think we see two types of people that it shows. The first are those who maybe have not had that Red Sea type moment yet. People that haven't quite been saved yet. They have not experienced the saving grace of Jesus. They've not been rescued yet. And I would say to you that God wants to set you free, and he wants to offer you a new type of life, a new way of living, one full of meaning and significance and community and joy and love and faithfulness. And this is freely available because of the rescue that Jesus has accomplished for you on the cross. So that's the first type of people. The second type of people are those that maybe have already experienced this rescue. Like the Israelites, they were already rescued out of Egypt, but they're wandering around the desert and they haven't quite made it yet. And maybe that's you. Maybe you feel like you've been a Christian for a long, long time, but you're just not there yet. You look up to Christians that are older than you, and they're so far along, they seem so close to God, and you're not quite there yet. And I think what this story is telling us is that maybe that's okay. Maybe that's okay. This was generations and generations. This is a lifelong journey for these people to get into this land. And maybe I would say it's a lifelong journey for you. Sanctification, transformation is a lifelong process where God is working in you day to day to day. But if you find yourself in the second group of people, which I think many of you are, I want you to ask yourself some questions. Are you actually following God's lead? are you actually following God's lead? Or are you someone who just says that they believe, but your life looks nothing like the life of Jesus? That's the game changer. Are you actually following God's lead? Are you allowing his presence to lead you through life, or are you just leading your own life? Are you out ahead of God doing your own thing? Because let's be honest for a second, there are some of us watching that trust and believe in Jesus to save us from our sin, but at the very same time, we do not trust in Jesus to lead us in our everyday lives. Right? We trust in Jesus, we call ourselves a Christian, we go to church on Sunday, we go to youth on Tuesday, but in the rest of our lives, nothing. There's no inclusion of God whatsoever. We trust in God to save us, but not to lead us in our daily lives. We trust in him to get us to heaven, but we don't trust him with our lives here and now. We don't trust him with our happiness. We don't trust him with our plans. We don't trust him with our future, with our friends, with our school, with our family. I think for all of us, we need a moment just like the Israelites. And maybe that moment for you is today. Some of you need that Red Sea moment. Okay, the Exodus, the rescue, the salvation. We need God to show up and to rescue us in the person of Jesus on the cross for the very first time. That's some of you. And that's available to you whenever you want, freely, free gift from God. But for a lot of us, we need to finally dip our toes into the water. We need to take that step of obedience and cross over the river. Take a step of obedience. Follow the presence of God and let him lead us wherever he wants us to go. Because the question is, do you want to lead your own life, or do you want God to lead you? He will bring you to the place you want to go. So that's all we have for you guys today. I hope you guys have a great discussion, and I hope that gave you lots to think about, and we will see you guys next week.